Alrighty, so let's go over the week 6 U code checkpoint. I'll be honest, this is my second version of this one. I did a first version of this, and as I was coding it, I realized that it was a bit more than I think we need to tackle in these U codes, but so I scaled it back with the hopes that it's more obtainable. But I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of challenge if you want it at the end. Now, I'm not saying this is not challenging because anytime you go from having coded on the carbon footprint to scaling down, it really makes you rethink and re-understand the steps that you've taken. Okay, so let's look at the instruction. So in this case, we're going to implement the order history table. Okay, so the idea that now that we have that stored and it's persistent because it's in local storage, right? The manager's like, I can only see that last one. I want to see all of them. So your mission just outlined, update your HTML, create a new module that loops through the array and creates a table row for every order. And then update the app.js to render this table every time the app loads or on a new order. So this shows you, as we did in the carbon footprint, there are two places we need to handle rendering this table: on a new page load and then on a submission. Okay. So to start this, of course, the instruction, and in this case, you're taking the ending code from week 6 attendance, creating that new folder in your public, and then updating the title of the HTML. Okay. And then I give you the table, and you can delete the old order summary. I think I ended up leaving it in, but it's really up to you in that case. But before we jump into this order list, this is the equivalent of the render table that you did. So I think it'd be worth at this point thinking through how that worked. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the carbon footprint. And one of the things that I would do here is I would go into my app.js and I would set a breakpoint right here after on handle form submission, after the results displayed, after my last submission has been rendered to the page, right? So right here, I have my result displayed called. I have that on the screen. So now I'm actually ready to say, okay, render the table. Okay, so whatever I have in the table at this point. So I'm calling that module, that function within there, or the method is another way to say it. We're passing the array. And inside of here, we're clearing what may or may not already be there. Now, in our case, it's the first submission, so it wasn't there, but it's just make sure it's, cleared so I can recreate that footprint table body, the inner HTML, make it blank so it's gone. And now in this case, in the carbon footprint, there's some logic we do if there's no entries, right? So right now here, and this is, you don't have to do any of this for the order history, but it is good to remember why we do it. It's like if we don't have any entries, then, put some content on here. If we do have, then make that table visible, right? So display it as a table, no entries. So get rid of this, don't display it. But what comes after is really important, right? So once we pass this logic, then we end up sorting our carbon, our passed in, right? So whatever we're passing in, we're actually going through a sort in this case, right? So the entries is what got passed in our carbon footprint. Now, again, in the challenge, you don't have to do this, but it's good to remind ourselves why we're doing it is we want to leave that entries untouched and go through a sort. So then on our table, we have them by order date. Now, again, you'll see this in the instruction. But what we do next here is actually the part you have to actually say, okay, this is part of what I'm going to need to think about, because in the instructions, you need to, iterate over, loop over what's passed in. Now, in this case, we're referencing the sort. You could just reference whatever is passed in this case, and you're going to create now. And again, I could see this as one function that you would export and have it all in one function. You could break this out as this has done, where we step into this, we get that first object, we then call a row element. We're going to create a row element by calling create table and passing that entry into it. Okay. So when we come up here, then we create that TR. Okay. And now this is where we're going to end up using this later. Very helpful to have that we call it a UUID, a unique ID. This is actually not what we have to do yet. Okay, but again, just remembering, why do we do this unique ID for later? But this is something you're going to want to do here. Now, in the instruction, I've actually provided you just this HTML, sorry, go back up here, that actually has to go here, right? So this is a really good guide to help you think through, okay, I'm going to need to create a row. And then within that row, okay, I'm going to have columns. And then what are the columns that you're going to need to have, right? So again, if I come back here to the instruction, right? So you can kind of see how I'm checking through the things, that you're going to need to think about. Create that TR, that row, that inner HTML, create those TDs. And in this case, date, I think should go in there, but quantity, price, right? And then append it. Okay, so append it. Now, in our example, when creating the row, right, then we actually had called a helper function. Do you have to do that here? Not necessarily. You could do that right in the function. And so we know for each of these TDs, we're running different helper functions that you don't necessarily have to do here. Okay, because your data is much simpler. Now, could you? Absolutely. You could think about ways to do that. Now, what you're doing here is once you have that row set up, right, that row created, that TR, right, then you're going to return. Now, I could envision when you're doing this challenge, you could actually just have this again as your main function that iterates over. So you could put this inside of, now I'm not telling you have to, I'm just giving you ideas about how you might approach this, because you don't have to do all the work that we've done in the carbon footprint, but you do need to recreate that basic functionality. So where we're returning a row here, where are we returning it to? Is saying we've called this, we now have our TR, our row, and now we want to say, hey, on that table, append child, that row element that we created in the last step. Okay, so just to kind of walk through, right, that concept of how, and I'll show you mine in a minute, right? So now once you do that, you do need to update your app.js. So once you get that table render happening, right, then you do need to set up the import, update your init so that, if you have orders, then you call if you have loaded orders. So meaning I've pulled from local storage, I've pushed now that to say I have orders. That is an array of objects that I got from the loaded orders, right? And then I'm going to call order list render. So this is what we just went through, that functionality. This is just showing you where you need to place it. And then update. So in this case, on the init then is when you're rendering. And why do you need that? Because you want to be able to handle this table render both on load, on page load, and on handle order submission. Okay. So, in the handle order submission inside your submit handler, okay, implement right after your new order, call this same module function to refresh the table. Okay, so that's important. So verify it works, right? Fill out the form if you see 3, and let's actually just go see this. I'll show you my output here. Okay. So in this case, now I ended up not hiding this and presenting it back. I'm just going to say GIF wrapping large. I'm going to say 10. I'm going to submit my order. Now I ended up leaving my results displayed. You don't have to, but now I created the table. You could also, if you wanted, add some CSS here, right? But here would be the idea of how you test. First, does it show up? And if I do another order, right, does it show up rendering cool? And if I hit refresh, does it refresh, right? So that's the understanding the different places in your code that you need to call that. Okay. So I hope this helps you. And by the way, if you'd like an additional challenge, and I haven't said, like I did the reward for the late pass, and many of you got it, which is awesome. I mean, I'm open to a discussion about, what you'd like here as far as a reward, but it's really about like, can you, do you want to challenge yourself to do it? But hey, give me a suggestion. I'm open to hearing it, right? So the additional challenge is to implement that wipe history, right? So in this case, we did quite a bit more content, but you could tear it down to its basic functionality, right? You wouldn't even have to, when we click, change the DOM to, hey, sure, set that timer. You don't even have to do all that. You could just do clear it out. And so in this case, right, I just at least gave you the idea of the kind of the outline of the steps. Again, this is optional. Make sure you get the one above it done. So, a reiteration, work ahead when possible, get help when you need it. I believe I said this, but if I didn't, you're taking your ending code from 6A, creating a new folder for W6, and then here's your URL. And, the grading is the same as it has been. Many of you are doing great jobs on these replies because you're really looking at the code, which is, I think, what you're really starting to feel is the importance of first attempting it on your own and then looking at somebody else's, right, to see. Now, in this case, when I talk about functionality, just to clarify, not only does the URL need to be correct, it needs to produce the output and without any errors on it, right? So, error is something that won't let the code work, right? And do you have all the commits on there? Okay. All right. So, hopefully this helps. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.